The glittering world of high fashion is no stranger to cutthroat betrayals, stolen designs, and bitter boardroom rivalries. But nothing could have prepared the Forrester family for the unfathomable tragedy that has just struck their dynasty. For weeks, the tension between the Forresters and the Spencers has been boiling over, fueled by corporate espionage, stolen talent, and broken hearts. Ridge Forrester had just drawn a permanent line in the sand, declaring all-out war on the Logan and Spencer factions. His ultimate weapon in this corporate battle was supposed to be a brand-new youth fashion line, a brilliant concept pitched by his son, R.J. Forrester, designed to secure the company's future. At the very center of this ambitious project was Electra Forrester, the beautiful, talented, and fiercely independent grandniece of Eric Forrester. She was poised to become the fresh, radiant face of Forrester Creations, stepping out of the shadows of her messy romantic past to claim her rightful place as fashion royalty. But in a horrifying twist of fate, the bright future that was meticulously sketched out on the design tables has been violently erased, replaced by a nightmare from which the Forrester family may never awaken. The day had started with such soaring triumph and unbridled optimism. R.J. Forrester had just delivered the pitch of a lifetime to his father. Armed with a portfolio of stunning sketches and a vision that promised to obliterate the competition at Katie Logan Spencer's new fashion house, R.J. had successfully secured Ridge's enthusiastic green light. The youth line was officially a go, and the victory was made infinitely sweeter by the fact that it revolved entirely around Electra. For R.J., this was not just a professional milestone. It was a deeply personal triumph. He had spent weeks patiently waiting in the wings, offering a steady shoulder and an open heart as Electra navigated the turbulent, often violent wreckage of her relationship with Will Spencer. Electra had finally made her choice, shutting the door on Will's volatile temper and choosing the promising, supportive embrace of R.J. Bursting with pride and overflowing with affection, R.J. left the Forrester Creations executive offices and drove straight to Electra's private home, eager to share the magnificent news that their shared dream was becoming a reality. As R.J. approached Electra's front door, his mind was undoubtedly racing with visions of their future. He likely imagined her face lighting up with that signature brilliant smile, the celebratory embrace they would share, and the intoxicating promise of a new chapter both in business and in love. But as he turned the knob and stepped into her private sanctuary, the heavy, suffocating silence of the house immediately sent a chill down his spine. There was no music playing, no sound of footsteps, no warm greeting echoing from the hallway. The air inside the home felt unnaturally still, thick with an unspoken dread that instantly wiped the triumphant smile from R.J.'s face. He called out her name, his voice echoing through the empty rooms, but he was met only with a haunting, hollow silence. As he slowly made his way into the living room, his eyes scanned the space, searching for the woman who had just become the center of his universe. Nothing could have prepared R.J. Forrester for the paralyzing, soul-crushing sight that awaited him. There, lying perfectly still on the cold hardwood floor of the living room, was Electra, the vibrant, ambitious young woman who was meant to be the shining star of Forrester Creations was entirely motionless. The sketches that R.J. had been clutching so tightly in his hands, the very blueprints of their shared future, slipped from his trembling grasp, scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. A guttural, agonizing cry tore from R.J.'s throat as he fell to his knees beside her, his hands frantically shaking as he reached out, desperately hoping this was a nightmare, praying for her chest to rise, pleading for her eyes to open. But the harsh, unforgiving reality of the moment crashed down upon him with the weight of a collapsing building. Electra was gone. The woman he loved, the muse of his greatest professional achievement, had been taken from him in an instant of senseless, brutal violence. The sheer horror of the discovery was only magnified when Ridge and Eric Forrester arrived at the scene. They had likely followed R.J., intending to join in the joyous celebration of the new youth line, ready to pop champagne and toast to the destruction of the Spencer Empire. Instead, The two powerful patriarchs of the Forrester dynasty walked into a scene of unimaginable despair. Eric Forrester, a man who has survived heart attacks, corporate coups, and decades of bitter family betrayals, was completely broken by the sight of his grandniece lying lifeless on the floor. This is a man who has dedicated his entire life to creating beauty, to draping the women of his family in elegance and grace. To see Electra, a young woman who shared his blood and his passion for design, struck down in the prime of her life, was a blow that physically buckled the Forrester patriarch. The tears that streamed down Eric's face were not just for the loss of a beloved family member, but for the brutal extinguishing of a bright, beautiful light that was supposed to carry his legacy into the next generation. Ridge Forrester's reaction was a terrifying study in absolute devastation, rapidly morphing into blinding, uncontrollable rage. As a father figure and the fiercely protective CEO of Forrester Creations, Ridge has always viewed it as his ultimate duty to shield his family from harm. He had just greenlit a project that was meant to empower Electra, to elevate her above the petty squabbles and the toxic drama that had plagued her recent past. Seeing her lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by the scattered sketches of the future they were supposed to build together, shattered Ridge to his very core. The agonizing wails of his son, RJ, echoing through the crime scene, only fueled the dark, vengeful fire that ignited within Ridge's soul. In that blood-curdling moment, the fashion war ceased to matter. The couture collections, the runway shows, the corporate espionage, all of it faded into absolute insignificance. Ridge Forrester was no longer a dressmaker. He was a grieving, furious patriarch demanding blood for blood. The piercing wail of police sirens soon shattered the eerie silence of the neighborhood, replacing the quiet tragedy with the clinical, chaotic reality of a homicide investigation. Flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of Electra's home, casting long, sinister shadows over the shattered Forrester family. Yellow crime scene tape was aggressively strung across the entrance, transforming a home of high fashion and youthful dreams into a sterile, heavily guarded fortress of forensic scrutiny. Detectives swarmed the property, taking photographs, dusting for fingerprints, and searching for any microscopic clue that could explain how such a vibrant life was so violently snuffed out. As the authorities began to piece together the timeline of Electra's final hours, the sorrow that blanketed the room slowly began to give way to a chilling, undeniable realization. The police needed a suspect, and the tangled, dramatic web of Los Angeles high society, one name immediately rose to the top of the list, glowing with the neon intensity of a smoking gun. All suspicion instantly, and almost inevitably, fell squarely upon the shoulders of Will Spencer. The motive, the means, and the terrifying history of violence were all sitting right there in plain sight, painting a damning portrait of a young man who had completely lost control. The detectives did not have to dig deep to uncover the explosive, volatile dynamic between Will, Electra, and RJ. For weeks, the entire city had been whispering about Will Spencer's terrifying descent into anger and despair. He had been brutally and coldly dumped by Electra, who had finally grown exhausted by his secrets, his divided loyalties, and his inability to control his raging temper. Electra had made the agonizing decision to shut Will out of her life completely, choosing the stability, the romance, and the professional promise offered by RJ Forrester. For a Spencer man, rejection is a bitter pill to swallow, but to be discarded in favor of a Forrester was an insult that cut straight to the bone. The investigative spotlight glaring on Will Spencer is entirely justified by his recent, highly documented track record of physical violence. This is the same young man who, fueled by alcohol, jealousy, and uncontrollable rage, brutally sucker-punched RJ Forrester at the bikini bar, leaving his rival with bruised ribs and a bloody lip. It was a terrifying display of the legendary, destructive Spencer temper, a temper that Ridge Forrester had repeatedly warned Electra about. Ridge had literally begged Electra to stay away from Will, sensing that the boy's violent tendencies were a ticking time bomb waiting to detonate. Will had proven time and time again that he was incapable of handling his emotions when it came to losing Electra. He had stalked her, pleaded with her, and howled at the moon in his desperate, pathetic attempts to win her back. When she finally delivered the ultimate rejection, turning her back on him forever to become the face of RJ's new fashion line, did Will's heartbreak finally curdle into a murderous, unforgivable rage. The psychological profile of Will Spencer in the days leading up to Electra's tragic demise paints a picture of a man teetering dangerously on the edge of the abyss. After being fired from Forrester Creations and effectively banished from Electra's orbit, Will had been staggering through the wreckage of his shattered love life. He had sought comfort in the arms of Melissa Dillon, pulling her into an outdoor shower for a passionate, desperate encounter in a futile attempt to numb his pain. But as Katie Logan Spencer so astutely pointed out when she caught them, burying his feelings in a meaningless hookup was never going to mend his broken heart. Will's obsession with Electra was a dark, consuming force. The thought of her moving on, thriving, and ascending to the throne of Forrester Creations alongside his greatest rival, RJ, may have simply been too much for his fragile, volatile psyche to bear. In the eyes of the police, and certainly in the eyes of the Forrester family, Will Spencer is not just a prime suspect. He is a monster who could not stand to see the woman he loved find happiness with someone else. The sudden, violent passing of Electra Forrester is not merely a devastating family tragedy. It is the ultimate, cataclysmic escalation of the generational war between the Forresters and the Spencers. What began as a bitter dispute over stolen designs, poached talent, and runway supremacy has now been irreversibly soaked in blood. Eric Forster's recent public declaration, branding the Logans and Spencers as thieves on a global livestream, was merely the prologue to this dark new chapter. The gloves have completely come off, and the concept of corporate competition has been entirely obliterated by a blinding thirst for vengeance. Ridge Forrester will not rest until he sees Will Spencer locked behind bars for the rest of his natural life. He will use every ounce of his immense wealth, power, and influence to ensure that the Spencer family is destroyed, holding Bill and Katie personally responsible for raising a son capable of such heinous violence. The hatred that now courses through the veins of the Forrester family leaves absolutely no room for mercy, no space for negotiation, and certainly no hope for forgiveness. On the other side of this blood-soaked battlefield, Bill Spencer and Katie Logan Spencer are about to face a parent's absolute worst nightmare. The moment the police knock on the door of the Spencer estate to question Will, the formidable Spencer machine will kick into high gear. Bill Spencer, a man who has never backed down from a fight and who protects his family with the ferocity of a cornered lion, will undoubtedly unleash a small army of the most ruthless defense attorneys money can buy. He will refuse to believe that his son is capable of murder, spinning the narrative to suggest that the Forresters are simply using this tragedy to frame Will and destroy the Spencer legacy. Katie, who has already been desperately trying to police Will's erratic behavior and warn him about the destructive path he was walking, will be torn apart by guilt and terror. The impending arrival of Darcy Dillon, Melissa's fierce mother, will only add more chaotic fuel to the fire, as Katie is forced to fight a war on multiple fronts while trying to save her son from a life sentence in prison. The ripple effects of Electra's untimely death will completely paralyze Forrester Creations. The company had banked its entire future on this new youth line. Electra was not just a model. She was the muse, the inspiration, and the very heartbeat of RJ's creative vision. With her gone, the project that was supposed to save the company is dead in the water. How can RJ possibly pick up a sketch pad again when every line, every fabric, every silhouette will only serve as a haunting reminder of the woman he found lifeless on the floor? The cruel irony of the situation is inescapable. The Forresters had spent months fighting over the hope for the future Diamond and the legacy of Hope Logan, only to completely lose their actual, living, breathing new hope in Electra. The design studios that once buzzed with excitement and creativity will now be shrouded in a heavy, suffocating mourning as the employees grapple with the loss of a young woman who had just begun to shine her brightest. As the investigation unfolds, the dark, hidden secrets of Los Angeles high society will inevitably be dragged into the unforgiving light of day. Where exactly was Will Spencer on the night in question? Was Melissa Dillon with him, providing an alibi, or does she hold the key to his guilt? What role did the manipulative Ivy Forrester play in pushing Electra to the breaking point, and will she bear the karmic weight of her niece's tragic end? And what of the mysterious, dangerous figures from Electra's past, like Remy Price, who always seem to bring chaos in their wake? The detectives will leave no stone unturned, tearing through the pristine facades of these wealthy families to expose the rot beneath. Every stolen kiss, every corporate lie, every whispered threat will be scrutinized as a potential motive in a murder mystery that promises to captivate and horrify the entire city. The sudden, heartbreaking loss of Electra Forrester marks a permanent, irreversible turning point for the bold and the beautiful. The innocence of youthful romance has been violently shattered, replaced by a grim, high-stakes battle for justice and survival. R.J. Forrester's heart has been broken in a way that time may never heal, transforming a bright, optimistic designer into a grieving, traumatized survivor. Ridge and Eric Forrester will be consumed by a dark, relentless quest for retribution, forever altering the moral compass of the Forrester dynasty. And as Will Spencer faces the terrifying prospect of losing his freedom, the Spencer family will be pushed to their absolute limits. This autumn promises to be a season of tears, trials, and terrifying revelations, as the legacy of Electra Forrester casts a long, sorrowful shadow over a city where beauty and brutality are forever intertwined.